we are, folks. It's a Friday night. We made it through the week. It's the 8th of February, 2019. Good evening, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. 2 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock as we begin another live stream, and a bit of an unusual one, if only because of the fact that the focus of attention is going to wind up being in a place where we don't often talk about snow, and that is up in the Pacific Northwest, but specifically in the bigger cities, Seattle, Tacoma, etc., etc. I was reading some of the forecasts from up there, and so you got to understand Seattle, as far north as it is, has such an exposure to the Pacific Ocean in terms of the flow that it doesn't really see snow very often. You have to have almost perfect conditions. The average snowfall there is about 6-7 inches a year, and they're going to get it all from this one storm, and they're probably going to get more over the next week to 10 days, considering how the weather pattern is. And if you're in the eastern part of the United States, anytime you you hear that it's snowing in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, and then down into Portland and Medford, Oregon, and so on, that is not good for snowstorms in the east, because it's telling you that you've got a deep trough out in the west and the corresponding probably strong ridge or strengthening ridge position in the eastern part of the United States. And when we look at the long-term pattern, it looks like it's going to stay that way for quite a while. So we've got a nice Friday evening crowd, including Matt Coletta, Johnny Quest here, or at least somebody else getting the big rains out west, where it's the big snows out west. Johnny, you getting a break at least from some rain until these next weather systems are coming along, and we'll see how much snow and ice that you get up in the mountains of Western Virginia before you change over, and this would be for the Tuesday event. And hello tonight to Timothy Veltman. Good to see you on board tonight. I saw Mahogany was here tonight too. Nice to see you. Scott Briller as always. William Huber. Zach Mark on board, and I know Seth Dominus was here. He stepped out for a minute. I'm guessing he's coming back. Mark Glatfelter and Fire Truck 1988, who asked, what would you rather do, get a historic blizzard 100% right or catch a record-breaking lake trout? How about both? Okay. I've actually done the first one a couple of times, so I'll go for the trout. I'll let somebody else get the accolades for any big predictions. Joe Gaffney on and Charlie Baker. So it's nice to see and Arnave Barol. So it's nice to see everybody on board tonight on this Friday. So real fast, a hi to all of the folks that are joining me from my weather app, my free app. You can download it on Google Play or from the App Store, and it works for any location. So you can get your local forecast, local weather conditions, and there's more of an emphasis on weather in the Northeast, but you even got snow maps going all the way up and down the East Coast, all the way as far south as Georgia, and as far north as Maine, and as far west as Pittsburgh. So go ahead and download it and enjoy. And for the serious weather aficionados, consider joining my weather platform on Patreon, which is only $2 a month. The link to Patreon is on the description of this live stream or the description of this video if you're watching it on a replay, and you get a lot of extra stuff on top of it. Plus, the $2 a month keeps the app free and free of ads. Okay, so there's no ads coming up at all. So again, the $2 I think is pretty fair, and of course you get all the additional Patreon benefits. So do consider that if you're really into weather. I think it's it's become a pretty good place to be, or so the current 230 members of Patreon tell me. So jump on board. Okay, let's get to the weather tonight. It is crazy out in the western part of the United States, which is where we're going to focus our attention. Look at all the winter storm warnings covering the Sierra Nevadas in California, and also up into the northern part of the state, all the way to the coast. And then you have winter storm warnings in Oregon, also to the coast. There's a smattering of advisories in a few other places, and this has to do with the terrain in the mountains, and where there's a bit of a shadow effect, where the one side of the mountain gets all the precip, but the other side stays drier. Those warnings, by the way, go all the way up to Seattle, and we've got advisories. I was looking at some of the forecasts for the coastal counties in Washington State, areas really not that far from the beaches and not with any kind of real elevation, calling for up to a couple of inches of snow. It just doesn't happen very often that it reaches down to the coast. Every once in a while it does. But you've got this off the wall, we've been talking about that Pacific North America Index, the PNA, being so negative. I mean, really, it's the readings on it are about as low as I think at one point last year we had the PNA down in the minus 600 range, and we could bring it up. We'll bring up the teleconnections a bit later, but you can see a whole slew of warnings there. Also in Nevada, parts of Idaho, and into parts of Montana. We have advisories posted. We've got winter weather advisories posted for parts of Michigan. There's a little bit of lake effect going on. Also in southwestern New York and in north central New York, where a couple of counties are under winter storm warnings. And we also have some advisories that we've got. So I want to make sure. Let me just double check here what the reason for those advisories are down in Texas. And I can see the temperatures are pretty cold. But the winter weather advisory is specifically for a round of mixed precipitation, a forecast of up to a half an inch of snow and sleet, and ice of less than a tenth of an inch. So that covers a number of the counties there in northeastern Texas. Otherwise, much of the nation pretty quiet. We've got some wind issues in the northeast. We've got some wind chill issues up in the northern plains and in the upper Midwest. Of course, they're coming off the big storm from yesterday, and now they're going to take a bit of a break before they got to deal with the next round of precip that'll be coming in for next week. And of course, some of that is going to be impacting the eastern part of the United States. So we're going to jump off. We're going to come back to the west, where the snows are showing up on the radar. And, well, first off, here's the Weather Service's snowfall forecast map in the Northwest. Seattle's got a 7 print, Olympia a 7, and I'm not sure. Portland's got a 9 print for it, 9 inches for Portland, Oregon. And it just to the east of there, of course, in the mountains, you're talking about snow in feet with 30, 36 inches or more. We'll let the map load. This, by the way, is the forecast through next Monday evening. Some of this is going to come front end. Some of this is coming in now, and then there are other systems coming for next week that are going to put more snow down. But you've got some big print numbers here down in California and the Sierra Nevadas. We're seeing a 48 print there, and you also can see the snow accumulations in the light blue, and that's basically an inch or two along all of the coastal areas. Very, very impressive indeed. And then as we go to the east, a swath of 1 to 3 inch snows through the plains, across the Midwest, and into the east. I would add, by the way, areas in some of these, the local forecasts in New Jersey, for example. There's a few missing spots in here. But I think that for Sunday night, the general area from Pennsylvania through New Jersey, the southern areas of the Hudson Valley, mainly south of Route 84 down to about Long Island, and maybe even into southwestern Connecticut, are going to lie in a zone of about for a coating to an inch or so. But there might be a little upside in southern New Jersey and in southeastern Pennsylvania, and maybe even into northern Delaware. Somebody could wind up with an inch or two, or maybe a bit more than that. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because this winter, as little snow that has fallen in this stretch in the I-95 corridor, these are places that have actually gotten a few small events along the way and have picked up 1 to 2, 1 to 3 inches. It's happened several times in South Jersey and in parts of southeastern Pennsylvania, and of course southern Pennsylvania as well, going back west to Harrisburg and a little further west than that. So I think it might wind up being a repeat performance. Very impressive, though, when you look and see what's going on in the western. The full map will show you the concentration of snow from now through Monday that is going on in the western part of the United States. And here's the satellite loop, which is equally impressive. There's a vorticity area here. You see it off of the coast of California, that rotation dropping slowly southeastward and up to the north off the coast of the Canadian Northwest. There's more energy getting ready to come down, and you can see the enhanced cloud cover into Washington and Oregon that's dropping southward. So that represents actually some snow that is going on right now, and it shows up pretty well on the radar here, this band of snow that has come into Washington State and into northwestern Oregon. It's probably some moderate to heavy snow in that band, and then there's a couple of other bands further to the northwest that have yet to play themselves out. So a busy snow night in a place where they don't get much. We also have some heavy precip and rain going on from San Francisco on southward along the coast of California, this arc, and that's part of that that upper low that you're seeing here, that rotation there. And there's the arm of moisture that is swinging in, that shows up so well on the radar out off the California coast. Meanwhile, we've got this precip that's moving across northeast Texas into northwest Louisiana, southern Arkansas, where we have some winter weather advisories up because of the cold air that is spreading down through the plains, is reaching all the way down into Texas. And then we have the lake effect action that is happening. Again, we're getting not quite as strong a setup as what we saw last week, where we had that really long band, that east-west band running across Lake Ontario. This one's a little bit weaker, but it still shows up pretty well on the radar across Lake Ontario into north-central New York. So up I-81, and the east-west road is I-90, so where it intersects there is near Syracuse. So if you go about 30 miles or so north of Syracuse up toward Pulaski and Watertown, that's where they're getting those big snows sweeping in off Lake Ontario, and then you've got the ones that are also sweeping in off Lake Erie in southwestern New York, south and west of Buffalo. On the surface map tonight, in the northwest, you've got a low sitting off the coast of Washington, and another one inland with a trailing cold front dropping southward. But you can see some of the temperature plots here. We've got readings in the 20s and 30s along the coast, some readings barely near 40. Same goes for what we're seeing in Northern California. And there we have a low center off the coast of California, which shows up so well on both the satellite and the radar. San Francisco right now in the upper 40s, and that low be pushing eastward. A lot of this energy is going to start, some of this energy is going to translate eastward for the system that's coming into the east on Sunday. And then you've got more energy that's going to send the storm system for next Tuesday. So on we go to the weather models today, which were pretty interesting. I'm going to show you the west first. And you can watch that snow for tonight into Saturday morning. That low that drops southward along the Oregon coast. And the cold air, by the way, you've got east winds across Washington State and Montana. That's all very cold. That's that Arctic high pushing down from Canada. So some of that cold air is getting dragged back toward the west coast on east winds, especially as that low drops further south. And then you've got another low that comes in for Monday. You can watch that energy then jump over the Rockies and head into the plains. And that low, that 99 low, that 999 low in West Kansas, this is Monday afternoon, is the setup for the storm in the east for Tuesday. But meanwhile, there's more significant snows Monday night and Tuesday in Washington and Oregon, and also into Seattle. It gets hit pretty hard here with another low tucked in right along the coast. And at the same time, by the way, there's some kind of system in the southern part of the jet that shoots out northeastward and comes into Southern California on Wednesday with some heavy rains and heavy snows there. They're up and down the whole state getting clobbered, and you've got the models at least forecasting snow to near coastal areas in Northern California, just north of San Francisco. And that will eventually translate into yet another storm late next week, which snow lovers, guess what? It's going to the lakes, and at least the way it looks. And here's a map that you don't see too often either, with total snowfall. And these numbers are really crazy if they wind up verifying over the next 10 days in the West. Look at those big numbers up in Washington State. Now, remember, some of that is mountainous terrain. It's hard to determine. I don't know what the number prints. I don't know if that's on a grid or if it's a specific point. I got to find that out. If those represent specific points, specific towns or cities, or are they just where the grids are? But you've got some 50 and 60-inch amounts in the mountains, but you even got some big amounts here along some of the lower elevation and coastal areas. See, that's the thing here. It's not the high elevation stuff so much. It's the fact that you're getting heavy snows even down in the lower and even in the lowest elevations over the next 10 days. As always with these, you can kind of use the numbers with a big grain of salt, but in terms of the coverage and in terms of the upper air pattern that we're seeing, it's probably a pretty fair assessment of where we're going over the next 10 days as far as snow is concerned in the West. And as I said from the beginning, if it's snowing in Seattle, it's usually not good for snow in New York City. Okay, if you want to make the comparison, that's telling you got that deep trough in the West and at least some ridging, and at times maybe even a strong ridge in the East. So let's back up to take a look at what's going on this weekend. There's still a lot of the Sunday night system looks fairly straightforward. It's weak, and that's some of that system coming in tonight into the Northwest, jumps over the Rockies and Plains. You can see it just kind of reforms here as it comes out of the Plain States and moves east. Doesn't have a whole lot with it. The GFS actually leaves all that snow west of the mountains, and I'm not exactly sure why it's doing that. In that it almost looks as if it's bringing out a western system for Tuesday. It looks like it's bringing it out about 6 to 12 hours faster than what the European is doing, and that's, I think, going to have that would have a big impact on the outcome. So I still don't have a lot of clarity as far as Tuesday is concerned and how that's going to play out with regards to specifics. I kind of have an idea in mind at this point, and tomorrow would be the day where I would probably make some kind of early call. But I'm going to switch to the NAM model so we can see what happens with the Sunday night, Monday system. So I think there will be a little more identity with this, and I also think that there's going to be probably a weak little low that's going to try and form off the Delaware coast sometime Sunday night that might just enhance the precip somewhat in southern New Jersey, maybe even touching parts of Long Island. It's hard to say, but at best we're talking a coating to an inch or two, and then you have the NAM also producing an area of sleet down into southern Delaware, back down to about Washington D.C. and into parts of Virginia. Again, this is a light event, so that moves out, and now you're beginning to see how the NAM handles the next system. This is for Tuesday with a low that is now northeast of St. Louis at 1 a.m. Tuesday, and you've got this sort of east-west band of precip that runs from Ohio down through Virginia, the northern edge of that, a band of sleet and freezing rain into southwestern PA. This is as far as the NAM goes at this point. The next run of the NAM model will take us out to Tuesday morning. So I'm going to be very curious to see where it has the precip Tuesday morning. Right now, it matches the slower looking European. Here's how it looks on the upper air. And when you've got a trough in the west like this, and you've got a ridge in the east, it's not the ridge. The ridge looks stronger than when you look at the measure of where the heights are high, but they're not crazy high. So the ridge is strong. The ridging there is strong. If you had a flatter ridge, then maybe you could make a case for a prolonged snow event before it changes over to rain. But I think this ridge is a little too strong. And when you see the trough position, and the arm of that trough is already lifting northeastward, so you can see it here coming into the west, and it just already starts to lift up to the northeast. But one of the big questions is the low-level cold air and whether it holds on. And here's how the GFS handles the upper feature as it takes that southern part of that trough and just kind of lifts it up into southeastern Canada, and then starts to slide it eastward after that. We've seen a number of GFS runs that were trying to show that this thing was going to slide from here straight across, which would have made for a different scenario, but it lifts up thanks to the trough out in the northwest that picks it up, and then just kind of after that it sort of loses it and kicks it away to the east. And by the way, here comes the next one. Goes almost to the same place. The system that follows this one on Tuesday looks almost the same. The only difference is there's probably less cold air for it to deal with. So here's the big question with regards to the second system in the east. Now, by the way, some of this snow is also going to make it into Michigan and northern Indiana and northern Ohio and into Illinois, into Chicago, Milwaukee, and so on. That general swath of 1 to 3 inches that we showed you. But now here's the issue with the GFS. If you remember yesterday, this is, by the way, at 7 a.m. Tuesday, it already has snow well north and east of New York City, with the rain-snow line in central New Jersey, the rain-ice line in central New Jersey. This is a good 12 hours. This is about 8 to 12 hours faster than the European. One of the big differences with the models today, the GFS, which up until now has been at times overdeveloped, particularly the parallel GFS at times has been overdeveloped with the idea of a secondary low. All of a sudden today, it doesn't even have it, or you can barely find a hint of it here, and it doesn't really show up until Tuesday night somewhere south and east of Long Island. Then you finally see it, okay? But at this point, you've got every model run seems to show less and less and more of a wrapped-up primary. If that is the case, you're going to wind up with a brief period of snow that goes over to sleet and goes over to rain. The other big difference with the GFS and the European is that the GFS has that high to the north in Quebec is much stronger and stays longer on the European than it does on the GFS. The European wants to hold that longer, and that would have implications on low-level cold air draining further south, that you could have a large area of sleet and freezing rain, maybe extending its way down into interior parts of Maryland and northeastern Virginia. So that's something we're going to want to pay attention to. I'm not at this point believing this as much as I didn't believe the overdeveloped the GFS with the overdeveloped secondary low. And the reason why it's overdeveloped is because in an upper pattern that looks like this, where you've got a ridge in the east, it's kind of hard to make a case for a secondary low in here. If you get one, it's weak. But I do think that now that it's gone to the other extreme, I think that might be an error also. Here's the European, and I'll show you the difference with the surface map on the European. And unfortunately, we don't have that preset match, but here is Tuesday morning on the European with the low right along the Missouri-Illinois border. You've got the high sitting in Quebec. You see the isobar that extends off North Carolina eastward and then kind of curls back around and then heads southwestward toward northern Florida. There's a big space in there inside that isobar back to central North Carolina. That's where there's probably some sort of secondary low that tries to develop. And in fact, the European does have this as a viable entity sitting near Nantucket on Wednesday morning. And when I looked at the in-between maps, it was very, very stubborn to pull that 32-degree line north of New York City until after 7 o'clock Tuesday, and it gave a fair amount of precip Tuesday afternoon. So it would imply at least a several-inch snowfall for New York City with higher amounts as you go north and west. I don't think that this is going to have time or enough cold air to put down bigger amounts. So this is where I go back to what I said last night. When you look at these snow maps, you've got to be really, really careful when you're out 4 and 5 days. When you get inside 72 hours, they might prove a bit more useful, but to go this far out is probably not a wise thing. But let's show them, and again, at least when I show them, I try to give them some context. So this is the positive snow growth map, the 24-hour snowfall, and if we'll get tighter on this, you can see some of the bigger snows. Remember now, we've got this primary low going to the Great Lakes, so we don't want to forget that there's going to be some decent snows here for parts of the Great Lakes out of this. So we'll come back to that in a second as well. But take a look here on the positive snow growth map through early Wednesday. This is only 24 hours, so I'm going to go back and show the total. But the 24-hour snowfall from Monday night to Tuesday night, and here's it on the tight view. So this would suggest, several inches. You've got some 3 and 4 inch prints here, which is probably not impossible. This might be a little bit on the high end. The numbers you're seeing inland seem to me to be a bit ridiculous, and I'm using the 10-to-1 ratio map. So there's probably a lot of sleet here in these numbers. You might want to consider cutting them in half. Perhaps that might work a bit better. So we'll look at the positive snow change, and here we've got numbers that might be a bit more reasonable. You've got these 2-inch amounts. This is, by the way, this is also going to include, no, because the GFS, I forgot, dries the precip out. So this is actually all from Tuesday, so that's good. It's apples to apples. So the positive snow growth map has 2-inch amounts south of New York City and in Hunterdon County, and then 1 to 2 inches down into northern Maryland and in southeastern PA. It's got bigger amounts as you start to go up the Hudson Valley and into Connecticut and further north. I wonder how much of this is overdone, but that's going to be a short range issue for me when we get into tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll put up a first call on this. And in the Great Lakes, with the snows that are coming here, now of course some of this 1 to 2, 3 inches from the first thing coming through on early Sunday, and then on top of that we've got numbers that go to 7, 8, and 9. So it looks like it generates a 3 to 6, 4 to 8 inch snowfall in many areas once the primary low that holds together and runs up to the northeast. And here it is on the surface map. It goes into eastern Iowa and then eventually over into Lake Michigan. So some decent snows across Wisconsin and back into parts of Minnesota and on up into the upper peninsula of Michigan. And it looks like you've got rain to snow happening over the lower peninsula. All right, back to the wider map. And let's take a look at the long-range pattern so you can understand why, if you're a snow lover, you can't be too happy with this. Troughs that come into the east go right out. They lift up. And look at the deep trough that, one deep trough after another. I'm just going to run it backwards. All right, so we go back a couple of days. Deep trough in the west. Another deep trough in the west. As soon as one system kicks out, another one drops right in. You watch that. I mean, it's amazing. But when you've got the bowling alley pattern set up for you, as they do here in the west, it's one after another, after another, after another. and we're only through the middle part of next week. And here's where a big piece pulls out, and watch that. Look at that trough that drops out of Alaska and drops southward from off the coast right into the northwest again. Now we're into the weekend of the 16th, 17th. So we're in President's Day weekend. Yet another deep trough in the west. That pulls into the east, and then more troughing at the end of the period. It's just endless. And then you've got this fire hose jet running from the Aleutians across northern Canada into southeastern Canada, and another fire hose in the Atlantic that just basically goes straight out from off the Florida coast. It actually goes southeast and then turns east and goes all the way across, clear past the Azores. I mean, that's just insane. You also have a big upper high that builds back from Europe and England back toward Greenland. I got to tell you, folks, this is not a fun-looking pattern all the way through. It's actually kind of looks bizarre when we get toward President's Day weekend. I would also point out to all, the snow lovers out there who are trying to make a silk's purse here out of the sow's ear. You've got a clock ticking problem right now in a big way. It's February 8th. Let's say that the next 10, I won't even go to the 16th day. Let's just say the next 10 days. So that takes you to President's Day weekend. Then you only have 10 days left in the month. That would give, if we get to this point in 10 days, okay, which is right here, if we've got this upper air in 10 days, deep trough in the west, deep ridge in the, strong ridge in the east, I'm telling you, it's going to take 10 days to 2 weeks to repair this, to get it to look like even something remotely favorable for any snow events in the east. By that time, it's the 1st of March. And there's a big difference between the pattern that we're seeing this year and the pattern that we were seeing last year, because last year at this time, we had all the signs out there of the big split that was coming in the vortex in the stratosphere. And that split occurred by coming up through the North Atlantic toward Greenland. And the vortex split, and then the models responded, and we saw this monumental block develop for the month of March. And of course, the result was the 4 nor'easters of the apocalypse. You don't see those signs here this time around. That's the thing. You don't really see the signs in the atmosphere of any major change in this pattern, and you just have to wonder that when this pattern does run its course, that we may just at that point transition over to springtime. I hate that, I listen. I seldom throw in the towel. Okay, I haven't thrown the towel in because I'm holding out for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, that we'll have one good solid chance in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Kind of hoping that that's the case, but outside of that, I may not have thrown the towel, but I got it in my hand, and I'm getting ready. And the other saying that the old opera saying about the opera not being over until the fat lady has sung her aria, and well, she may not be singing, but she just walked on stage waiting for her cue, and she's clearing her throat. All right, she's getting ready. So here are the teleconnections, by the way, and the really one big standout, and this impacts the what's going on. This is obvious with respect to the depth of the trough and the ridge that we in the west and the ridge that we have in the east. This Pacific North America index, which usually runs, you usually see it somewhere between, say, minus 200 and plus 200, is down to minus 600. I mean, this is as negative a P&A index as you can get. The EPO is also strongly negative going into early next week. That is just, it's still pretty negative right through much of next week. So that accounts for the fact that we are going to have some low-level cold air at least fighting the next storm trying to go to the west. And it still stays negative, kind of starts to get a little closer to the neutral line toward the end of the period, but it's still negative enough. And the North Atlantic Oscillation is slightly, ever so slightly positive, and then is straddling the neutral line to barely negative toward the end of the period. But it's really I think it's really this PNA, this Pacific North America Index, which measures the extent of a ridge in the west and a trough in the east, and there's a couple of other geographic areas that it takes into account. When it's positive, you've got the ridge in the west, trough in the east. When it's negative, you've got the trough in the west and the ridge in the east. But here we have it super negative. And I remember last year we spent a lot of last winter with a super negative PNA, and we saw some really strange things happen with it. But I'm just looking at the other factors. For example, when we had the super negative PNA, we also had a super negative NAO at the same time in March for those 4 nor'easters. I don't think we had a positive PNA index for any of those, but we had a negative NAO with the right kind of negative NAO for storms in the east. We don't even have that, okay? The EPO helps, but it doesn't help in the way that a strong negative NAO would help. So it's that Pacific North America Index, the overall setup of the atmosphere with the deep troughing that's out in the west that's just driving everything. And you're going to have to wait. By the way, it does make a huge jump from ridiculously negative almost back to the neutral line by the time we get to February 22nd. So you might want to mark that date down. If the teleconnections continue to show this kind of rapid ascent, that maybe around that date, that big change in pressure might mean that there's going to be something of size somewhere. Where, I don't know, but there might be something of size somewhere. All right, coming back to the chat board tonight. As always, those of you who joined late, nice to see everybody on board. Jason Barry last used his snowblower on November 15th. One of the things Joe Rayo and I came across last night was we were digging around some New York stats, and at least for Long Island, if we don't take out as measured at Brookhaven Labs, which is east of me. I live right in the middle of Long Island, literally. And then Brookhaven Labs is about 15 miles east of me. Their snowfall from that November storm was about 4.5 inches. If we don't get any, if we don't get at least one snowfall of 4.5 inches, this will be the first time on their records, which go back to 1946-47, that the November snowfall wound up being the biggest snowfall of the entire year. In New York City, you can go back to 1939 and you can clearly see that it hasn't happened since 1939. But in the winter of 38-39, the November of 1938 was an especially snowy November. So yeah, at that point you'd have to go into each individual year and start looking to see what the specific numbers are. But you can glean from the numbers in the other years that it'll be the first time since 1938 that this happened, and that would be the number to look for is 6.3 inches for New York City Central Park. And I think that I think it's quite possible that it's every day it becomes more and more likely that 6.3 is going to be it, at least from what I'm seeing right now. And yes, Bob Hurley, the barbecue is definitely ready. In the meantime, until we warm up a little bit, I am going to continue to use my cast iron skillet. And Fire Truck 1988, the fishing gear, absolutely getting it ready. I'm waiting. A lot of my local ponds and lakes are frozen, or at least partially frozen. So now we've got the cold weather for the next few days. But after we get past next Tuesday, I think there's going to be opportunities for me to do some freshwater fishing. I'm going to try maybe an early try for bass. The latest couple of model runs, Anthony Orr asks, is an error by making it rain too early. It might be. The European with its stronger high is trying to force dry air down the East Coast. It's a colder, the European was colder today than the GFS. Let me just look really fast to see if, I'm going to do this, I'll do this off screen. I just want to see if the new parallel GFS is in. And actually we do have it. Okay, so let's take a look. Let me see how much is in here. Maps, by the way, is always courtesy of Levi Cowan's TropicalTidbits.com. Well, that's odd. Let's see. 12, 18, 24. Yeah, the parallel, and also, I judging by the way the things that the parallel GFS has done, I got to tell you, when this becomes the operational run, it's not going to be a fun tool to use because it just has been doing just such crazy things here, and I already got a hint of it doing something crazy again. So here we have Sunday night, Monday. So it does have some snow coming in Sunday night into Monday morning. It's oddly enough, it's a little slower with this lead system, and then it's faster with this because this is at 1 a.m. Sunday. 1 a.m. Tuesday, and it's got snow cutting across New Jersey at Route 195, and it's snowing in New York City before daybreak. And you've got this big area of sleet across northern New Jersey, Long Island. This is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a snow that goes over to at least 3 or 4 hours or more of sleet, and then changes over to rain by Tuesday evening. Your secondary low is sitting right over the New Jersey coast. I mean, literally sitting on the coast. There's some kind of little wave there. So it tries to develop it, but it actually develops that low inland in Virginia. Because look at the primary. I mean, it just wraps this primary up down to a 985 low in northern Illinois. And then that lifts out. And then here comes the next lakes system. Of course, again, not that different from what we're seeing here on Tuesday for Friday, although it does show a little cold air trying to drain down from New England. And then again, this is primary, secondary again. We'll see. And then that's out. And then it's got this. Oh, come on. Really? No. You know what? No. I'm not, it's enough after the third or fourth day, and after that, I just have no confidence in it at all. It's done some really, really loony stuff this week. And, to even regard it as remotely close. Recognize the overall pattern is that trough is in the west. It's going to be very hard, and that ridge in the east. It's going to be very, very hard for anything to happen in the eastern part of the United States. Michael Azera, the regular GFS was showing a major snowstorm this morning over the snow hole. Yes, of course it was, with a 975 low. Of course, and you should not believe it. The winter is littered with models putting fantasy snowstorms. It's insane. You would think that the idea of a broken clock being right twice a day, that somewhere along the line, just from the randomness of it, that it would have gotten something right. But nothing, not one, not a single one. We can't really look at the stream and models more than 5 days out. I would just say, though, Steve LaPointe, the pattern is awful, okay? The trough is in the west and the ridge is in the east, and there's really no sign of that breaking down. So I think we have to recognize that that is the case. And that means that the chances for snows in the east, it would have to be absolutely perfect. And if it's not perfect, you're going to wind up at best with a quick shot of snow at the start and a change over to rain. You can't make a big snowstorm when you've got the ridge position in the eastern part of the United States and the trough in the west, and there's nothing that says that that's going to change anytime soon. Now, I do believe that even at times when you have the overall pattern is a certain way, that you do get opportunities short opportunities that open up inside the main pattern. You might briefly have a shift somewhere in there that gives you a shot at something. But that's really what you're going to have to look for. I don't see anything here that suggests that you're going to see a big change. And I also don't believe that blocking is the problem. Okay, the lack of blocking is one issue, but it's not the driver here. It's just, I think a lot of it has to do. It's the Pacific jet. It's the Atlantic. It's the structure of the Atlantic jet across the Atlantic, and the Pacific jet, which has been unrelenting. Jason Barry, with regards to this, you're talking about the polar vortex in the stratosphere. It split. It stayed split for a while, and now it's kind of gotten itself again. Mr. Bastardi is saying changes coming around the 14th and lasting until mid-March and then spring. Okay, sure. What can I tell you? Gamblers who are down by a lot of, if you're down by a lot of money, if you're at the gambling table, okay, and you're down by a lot of money, and you decide to say, well, I'm going to make another bad bet, and hope that I get all my money back. I think that's where we are at this point. If you're still holding on that you're going to see a major pattern change around the mid-month, I'm sorry. I hope I'm wrong. Maybe he's right. I don't know. But I'm not seeing it, and I haven't seen it for the last few weeks. Sometimes you see little hints here and there, but the overall scheme of things, I would say that I would say he's going to have a tough time having that happen. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not a long range guy. I don't. I can't go out that far. I don't see the point of it. Okay, I really don't. I also don't see. I don't understand a lot of people's obsession with it. That's the thing that drives me crazy. It's everybody's always perpetually thinking about 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road. Why? And then of course you come back with the criticism of you can't get the next 5 days right. Why are you talking about the next 5 months? But yeah, I just don't see it. Okay. I don't even know, Daniel Seaman, what big hole in Antarctica are we talking about? No, I mean, weather happens. This is, nothing that's going on right now has this is not a first time event. Why do we have to find some sort of apocalyptic reason to explain why the weather is not behaving the way you want it to behave? That's really what the question is here. You want the weather to behave a certain way. It's not. So then you gravitate, then people gravitate to, well, it must be because of some sort of apocalyptic reason why it's not happened. No, it's part of the randomness of seasons. Some years it's in the east, some years it's in the west, some years it's in the middle. Talk about what happened with respect to the overall flavor of the pattern as it made some changes as we went from December to January. And you've heard me say this many times. The pattern change you want and the pattern change you get are not necessarily the same thing. And in this case, for those of you who live in the coastal areas of the Northeast, in that stretch from Boston and New York City to Philadelphia, where you apparently a lot of snow lovers reside in this area, and seem to think that you're supposed to get unrelenting cold and nonstop snow from the 1st of November to the end of April, and it just does not work that way. And yes, Gary Brown, the sun angulus will be out in full force, except that this year perhaps the lack of opportunities for snow in the east, it may not necessarily make a difference because there won't be any systems for the sun angle to play on. I personally prefer the moon angle and the street light angle. That's my obsession. All right, it's coming up on 7:51 Eastern time. I think we're going to put a wrap to this tonight. Again, make sure that if you haven't done so already, go to Google Play or go to the App Store and download my free weather app, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. You can use it just about anywhere, even though the stuff that I put on there is focused around the area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, including New York City, Philadelphia, northern New Jersey, Long Island, southern Connecticut, and the lower Hudson Valley. But I've got updating snowfall forecast maps from Maine all the way down to North Georgia. And also, you can access your own local weather conditions by putting your location in, as well as your local National Weather Service short and long range forecast. So it's Meteorologist Joe Chaffee on Google Play and also in the App Store. And for you weather enthusiasts, there's this link to my Patreon platform, which is just $2 a month. It's that $2 a month, you can support my channel, my live streams here on YouTube. Also, I do live streams just for Patreon members, as well as other weather posts that are not on my website and not on the app. Plus, we do a little bit of school stuff too. So that's $2 a month. So if you consider it, the link is up there on the chat board, and it's also on the description to this live stream and the description to this video. Speaking of school, I did another instructional video today for those of you who are kind of trying to figure out what all these maps mean. Well, every day I'm going to try to put at least one instructional video on explaining all the different things that we look at, the different tools that we use, so that you can have a good understanding when you see the maps come up and you can say, oh, I know what he means by that. So check out on my YouTube channel the instructional playlist. Daniel, it's fine. No, it's totally fine. Okay, you didn't do anything bad. But you got me on a bit of a rant there with regards to the apocalyptic stuff. But no, it's all good. So anyway, on my YouTube channel, there's an instructional playlist. So if you're a little behind the curve when it comes to weather stuff, look for a new video. But try to do one a day. I might skip a day here and there depending on my schedule, but I'm going to try to do one a day. 9:25 if Joe and I both feel like it, because sometimes on Friday night we kind of lose it a little bit after a 5-day week. But we will try and do a Joe and Joe weather show tonight at 9:25. I will be on board over the weekend. We'll keep an eye on this system for next week, and we'll see what happens with whatever happens for Sunday night. Have a great rest of your Friday night, and a great weekend. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow and again on Sunday.